Hey, welcome back to the Relentless Positivity Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Martin. Got a special guest today. Got my friend Alan Wilson on here. So he's the lead teaching pastor at South City Church here in Huntsville, Alabama. He's married to Dawn. Got a couple kids, Kaylin and Trip. And thanks for coming on, Alan. Appreciate you being here.
I'm so happy to be here, Joe. Thank you.
So I want to talk about a little bit kind of how you got into the ministry, all that good stuff. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Huntsville, so I'm a Huntsville native, which there's a few of us out here. I know you are too. We went to
Yeah,
high
it's,
school
it's pretty
together.
rare, but they're out there.
Yep, that's right. So grew up here in Huntsville, went away for a while to college, undergrad, and then went and worked in Indianapolis for National Fraternity. I was a director of spiritual programming there. And so I went through about 40 states, close to 100 college campuses, working with fraternity guys on values clarification, issues of faith. And it was just a really neat growing time. And that's when I really, I guess, got started into ministry. I started going to seminary at that point. And so, and that's been about, 20 years ago now.
Wow. So you hear about people kind of hearing the call. Did you have that, or just kind of it would always? I know you grew up in church, but did you feel the call to ministry, or is it just one day you're like, hey, this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, and that's a great question. My view on calling is that we all have a call to answer, and that our first call to answer is to a person, to Jesus, and that we belong to Him as our primary vocation in life as followers of Him. But then, He has certain giftedness and certain tasks and certain opportunities that He assigns to us, and then we get the chance to walk with Him into those places. And so I've been fortunate to have some of those open up and have the possibility to train and study and lean into those areas. And so, when I was going to seminary and working with college students originally, I felt like that I wasn't actually called to the local church. I wanted to be, kind of out in the world and be a touch point between the church and the world, because I didn't see I saw that sometimes there was a barrier there, that church wall could be a barrier. And so I wanted to be a kind of a person in and out. And so that's why I didn't really pursue, full-time, what you would call classical church ministry right out of the gate. I came back and I started working in the business world. And I've actually been in the pharmaceutical sales world with a pretty full-time job now for, I've been in that industry particularly about 14 years and
Okay.
still am.
So what's it like having that kind of that bivocational pastor life right there? That you've got your church on one side and then the business world on another. What's that look like? Let me back that up. What's your
Yeah.
daily routine look like?
Well, so fortunately, the way that we do things at South City, I'm very much part of a team, right? Part of a
Mhm.
launch team.
Right.
And so, there's so many folks in the process that have a hand in that. And we're very fortunate to be partnering with Cove Church, our kind of home or mother church that has a lot of resources that they're able to put in and to employ to help us fulfill what we believe is our mission. And we also have another ministry, Nueva Vida, and pastors there that are full time. And so, so honestly, I'm a very, very part-time cog in this wheel. It's just that part of what I do and enjoy doing is teaching. And so I'm up front a bit, but in terms of the a lot of what you might think of as the everyday, rotational kind of workings of the church, I don't have as much to deal with in that because, again, of my full-time role in my sales job in pharmaceuticals. So it gives me a chance to kind of lean into my giftedness and then also see others empowered to go out and to do other parts of ministry that I think are really helpful.
Right. So if people don't know, then you started a brand new church in the middle of a pandemic. So kind of take me back to the beginning of that. What is the first step of starting a church during a pandemic? So what does that look like?
Well, like anything, you want to start small, in my
Sure.
view. If you can lead small, and we certainly didn't start out thinking that we were going to be part of a church plant in the midst of a pandemic. This has been about 2 years in the making, and
Right.
so our plan originally was to launch just before the pandemic came in. But then, as we were meeting with a team, an interest group, we began to see this unfold, which no one really saw coming, in early 2020. And so we've had to shift and, I mean, these slang words like pivot, we've
Yeah,
we've pivoted so much, we've about broken our ankles. All right.
yeah, I bet. I bet.
In trying to get this thing up and going. And again, I don't think that we would have been able to do that without, the support of our home church and other people coming alongside of us. And so, the other thing is that it is in the midst of a pandemic, so it makes logistical. You have to be nimble. You have to be agile in the services you offer, in the ways that you offer them. We've had to lean into technology, and we're still very much learning on that. But we're trying to offer different avenues to communicate with people. But at the same time, there's also, I think, a great need and openness that people have, where a lot of churches haven't been able to make that pivot, haven't been able to offer and minister to new ways to folks. And so it gives us a place to kind of step in and be Jesus to them, and as best we can. And I think that really is part of the rationale for new churches in the first place.
Yeah, so I was gonna get you to cover that part. You've covered it before, but kind of,
Yeah.
so why a new church? If people don't know where Alan's church is located, there's 4 churches within walking distance. Not a very far walk either. So why a new
Right.
church in that location?
Yeah, we're kind of church row, like
Yeah,
fraternity row. That's kind of what I joke about. And yeah, so there's a couple ways to look at it, right? One way is to say, okay, there are churches here, but we want to ask, are there growing churches here? Are there churches that are growing, that are aligned with certain missional values and are practicing certain things? And that's not to say that one church is any better than another church, but what you find is that churches tend to center themselves around different visions and values and ministry. And so that's why they attract and they reach different kinds of people. And so what we found is that, like anything in life, churches have life cycles too. And so it can be more and more difficult as churches age, which most of the churches that are in our area, are over 15 years old. And so when you start getting into that space, a church, it's hard to rely on a church to just rely on addition to grow and to reach people. You want to start thinking about multiplication. And that's what all living things do, is they
sure.
multiply.
Yeah,
And so what we found is that the best engine to reach new people that come in is to kind of breathe some new life into that kingdom, movement. And so that's what we're trying to do. I know that some folks see that as competition in a lot of ways, but it's not like a Chick-fil-A is moving, next door to McDonald's or something. I mean, it's something that we're all part of, trying to serve and to love our neighbors well. And so places where we can collaborate, we do, and then places where we feel like we can offer, a unique vision and emphasis to folks, that's what we want to lean into.
yeah.
So
We're all serving the same God up there. So that's all
that's
that
right.
matters.
That's
And
right.
you just want some variety. Some people get served and get fed in different ways. So just providing that outlet is great. And I think it's needed. And if you like serving at that church and this church, like you said, as long as you're getting fed, yeah, it's same God. So that's all we're looking for. Just give people options. I think that's great.
Absolutely.
So what does it look like? You're working full time, making this church happen. What's that look like with kids and the wife? And do you see them and stuff like that? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, I'm still figuring it out.
Okay.
But, it really is a balance. It's a tension. And one of the good things is that, my wife and the kids are very much on board. So it's not something that, again, I can just do or help with, but we all are kind of in it together. My daughter is just kind of owning the children's ministry right now. And it's just so funny because she had a volleyball game. She plays on a volleyball travel team about 2 weeks ago. And she said, gosh, I'm not going to be able to be at church and lead the kids, this morning. And I said, well, we have a team, honey. We're forming teams and people to help, with that. And so she said, yeah, but that's kind of my job. Right.
Yeah.
And so like, there's part of me that says, no, yeah, I want you to feel that ownership, but then I also want you to understand we don't have really ownership into the places we get to serve. We're there, just to be a part and to give. And we also want to be able to see others step into those places. And so it's a good tension to have, I think. But we're doing it together, and their support means a lot to me. And then in a way, it gives us and focuses us in a routine and a pattern which I think is part of what the mission of church is to do, is to give people reminders and signposts and places to practice their faith. Because, as you work out in the physical world, is it easier for you to work out at home alone with no one there pushing you, or is it much better to have a coach and have a
Yeah.
team and have people and to have a routine and a practice? And so I think that practicing part of our faith, it just kind of ups our ante to lean into that, and that's probably a good thing with the other distractions we have.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. She's taking ownership, man. That's big for a teenager to do something like that. So that's
Yes,
a good sign.
absolutely. I'm very proud of them. Yeah.
So you've mentioned yourself that you're a lifelong learner. How has that served you throughout this process?
Well, it's important to me. I've been, like I mentioned, I started in seminary way back in like the year 2000, and got a certificate in Christian studies, then finished a master's degree. About 2010, I started feeling like I really need to go back to school, and I really felt I was getting more involved in just serving in a local church at that point. And so I went back and I finished a master's degree in Christian apologetics because I really value the life of the mind. And I think that when we think about our cultural witness and how to be winsome and also engaging with ideas and practices of our world, that we want to be up to speed on that. We want to know and to think carefully, to love our God with all of our heart, souls, and mind. And so that was a big deal to me. And so I went back and finished that. And then when I took a break actually from sales world and went into full-time ministry for about 4 years and served as a student pastor, a young adult pastor, and teaching pastor at Cove. And when I did that, I also went back and finished another master's degree in theology, which has always been something of a big interest of mine, obviously. And so that's about 7 years total, part-time in school with the family and jobs. And but again, I don't know that I would have learned as much just on my own studying and reading, but it was able to give me a foundation to where now I know and have the freedom to go out and to look and to process things in a way that I think is helpful. And but it doesn't stop. I had this poster growing up as a kid in my room. I love swimming and golfing. Those are my two sports growing up. And there's a picture of a swimmer, and it just said, "Real winners aren't satisfied with yesterday's victories."
Yeah.
And I've always thought about that today, that's the way our learning is, is that real learners aren't satisfied with just what they knew yesterday. We want to keep an open mind, not so open that, our brains fall out, but we want to keep an open mind, and we want to be interested and engaged. And I think that's part of the way that we love God and others,
Yeah, that's it. Because let me ask you this: you've called yourself a theological mutt before, so kind of explain that and how your different education background went into that.
Yeah, and that's great. Partly that's because I've been in several different church traditions. Right now I'm serving in a Methodist church, but I didn't grow up in a Methodist church. So I probably have about 4 church backgrounds that I've been engaged in and involved with over the years. Going to 3 different seminaries. 2 of the ones I went to, I would say, are broadly in a conservative evangelical tradition, although they're multi-denominational. They're some of the larger ones in the US, United States. And they were great for my background, and then also going to Asbury, which is in Kentucky, which is a primarily Wesleyan in heritage and is a large sending ground for Methodist ministers themselves. So yeah, I think that it's good to be well-rounded and to listen to different voices. I think that the comparison brings clarity in a lot of ways in life, and that we want to be able to navigate and to understand knowledge and truth in a way that brings wisdom and not just information. And so to do that, I think it takes some diversity, and it takes some different kind of experiences and openness to have,
Absolutely. Yeah. So speaking of that diversity, so your church, it's not just a regular church, it also has a bilingual service, and it's another ministry within there, Nueva Vida, you mentioned earlier. Touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is exciting to me, and this is a total God thing. When we were first starting to launch in this area, we had not established a relationship with them initially. But as we got into our place here, just through a series of interactions, we were able to meet these pastors, or in Lucy Morales and their daughters, which are phenomenal. They're very, very gifted, musically and in teaching and in interpreting, and then being able to teach. And we just got to know them and their hearts, and they were ministering here close by. That's where they live, and also trying to form house churches, across the Tennessee Valley. But they didn't have a home base. They didn't have a home place to kind of meet and to work out of. There was another church they were affiliated with, but that relationship was coming to an end, because different alignment and values and things like that. Just as we talked about, differences make a difference, but that's okay. And so for us, it was an opportunity to come together and join together and say, hey, let's see if we can partner and do a multi-ethnic, plant together and just see each other and love each other and work together on things and see our strengths kind of come out. And it's been challenging. There isn't like a lot of what you might call models, I guess, to go on that I know of. I mean, I could be ignorant of that, but the thing that it takes, I think, the right people in the right time, and a lot of grace. And so we're leaning into that, and it's exciting to me. I mean, honestly, if one of our services prosper, we both prosper.
Right.
If one hurts, we both hurt. We're there for each other, and we're totally in it together as one big family. And so I think it also is a good witness for the world right now, in terms of being able to come together with people that may look a little different or seem a little different than you, to realize that we have more in common than apart, than our differences make. And so for us as a body of Christ, it gives us at least a visual example of what we should all be striving for, in our view.
It's amazing when you get out there and meet people that don't look like you. They're exactly like you, by the way.
On the
I've been to
inside,
Nicaragua a few times, and I've
right.
been to Nicaragua, like I said, a few times, and they've got the crazy uncle, just like you've got the crazy uncle. They've got the little kid that gets on your nerve. They've got all that just like we do. Just because they look a little different, we're all the same, man. It's just people are afraid of what's different, right? I'm a ginger. People treat me differently sometimes just because I'm a ginger, right? Just a little bit different. But yeah, if you're not afraid to sit down and break bread with somebody, you'd be amazed what you can learn, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And it's something that we're always learning, and that attitude of humility, it just goes a long way. And it's something that obviously I'm continually coming back to and being humbled by. But I think that we can definitely do that and lean into that as persons and grow from it. Sure. And so we're still figuring things out and still working towards that together. But I think that the ideal and the kingdom mindedness of it is just such a neat thing to be a part of. I'm just glad to kind of be a part of it,
Yeah. So what does a bilingual service look like? As far as, I walk in, is it half in Spanish, half in English? What does that look like?
Yeah. So for the most part, that's exactly right. From the up front, they'll have, but anything that's spoken from up front is typically done in both English and Spanish, and they'll do the Spanish first and then English. Sometimes with an interpreter, sometimes without. The singing tends to be all in English. There may be some songs or some parts of the songs that they revert back to the Spanish language, but then in the preaching time, then there's typically a pastor and an interpreter. And so, Or is the main teaching pastor there, and his daughter, Karen, is their interpreter. And to see the dynamic between the two, Karen doesn't just, she doesn't just interpret, but she teaches, she preaches in there with him, and so it's a really kind of neat thing to witness and be a part of. And for a lot of folks, it gives them a place that they can look up and see people in leadership and see people that they can relate and connect to. And then that gives them an open door to come in and to be a part and get involved. And then once folks kind of have a feeling they can get involved and belong, then oftentimes you see their beliefs coming, and you see the interactions and the way that people can then start forming communities, together, that's really special.
Yeah. It's important to see someone that looks like you in leadership. I think that's important. I think it's awesome you guys are doing that.
Yeah,
So,
a lot of places say, we really want to be, diverse. We really want to lean into reconciliation, and for me, my own conviction of that is, it's something to say that, but it can be a tough thing to actually practice. And part of that practicing is to yield and to lean into, um, to give voice and position to people that can have real influence in your organization, that do bring that. Not just diversity of skin color or ethnicity, but you want to have people that come in there that can see things a little different too. Not so much that you derail yourself from your vision, your core values, but our perspectives, can be really helpful, and they can help us see our blind spots. And so I think that all those things are important to just consider as whatever organization that we're leaning into.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you have a podcast yourself. It's
I do.
your naming skills are almost as good as mine. So mine, you can see Joe Martin Fitness. I put my name as yours. It's called Ask Alan Podcast. So what is that about? What do you do in your podcast?
So how that came about was when I was a student pastor at Cove. I really wanted to help create an environment and a culture where students felt like that they could ask questions, where they could wrestle with their doubts and their beliefs and understand how faith and doubt works, and to not be afraid or to cover those things up. But because the thing about doubt is it's not having them that's a problem. It's where we take them. And so that was one of the values that we really wanted to lean into. And so we started this, we'd have an Ask Alan night or service, and the kids just loved it. They made T-shirts on their own, which is hilarious to me, right? But they just loved it, that they thought that, man, this is a church, this is the place, and where I can come and literally, nothing is too far outside the lines, and so when we were starting to think of building culture in this church, we want this church to be a place where questions are welcome. So if you go to the website, southcityhsv.com, you'll see right at the top there, questions welcomed. And there's a little video that I have there, and we talk about that, and talk about how we are seeking a faith. We are trying to delve into a faith, seeking understanding and continuing that. And so, the Ask Alan thing just came up because I got two former kind of students that are working with us on staff, and they were like, we should just call
Bring
it
it
that.
back. Yeah.
So we're just bringing it back, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. We talk and we get questions between ourselves that we want to discuss, and then also we're trying to work better with social media to get other people to get engaged and to send in questions. Our most watched or downloaded episode so far is one that I did with our last series on A World Divided, that dealt with the questions of other religions and how a Christian approach to other religions, what that looks like. How can we lift up Jesus as the true Lord and Savior, while also trying to live in a world that's very pluralistic and diverse? And so what does that look like, and why can we as Christians be both inclusive and still hold exclusive commitments to our faith? So.
Right. Yeah. You're a brave man letting teenagers ask you questions.
Hey, listen, they're without a filter. And I tell you, the questions that they would ask as seventh graders, even, living in our world today, were things that I didn't think about or really struggle with until probably college.
Right. Yeah.
And as you get to know them and talk with them, and they get the space where they feel comfortable about voicing their questions and their thoughts, you realize what a need that we have in our world to just be able to not shut that down or to judge from that, but to be stewards of it and to help others, as they grow and think well.
That's great, man. That's like I said, man. You're a brave guy asking questions and not knowing what, not having a pre-advanced questions.
I don't have all the answers, and that's but I, I've kind of had my ear to the ground on a lot of them, and I think that there's at least certain healthy processes, just like there's healthy ways to deal with a lot of things, in life. If you can give, one of our values is to help people learn to think for themselves, but we never really think for ourselves. We always are in community. We're always being influenced. And so help people to know where they can go and how to process those things and understand, and then grow in that. So that's something that we want to see happen,
That's
for
great,
both
man.
kids and
All right.
adults alike. We all
Yeah,
need that, right?
sure. So I just got two things and then we'll close it up. At first, I'm not in the witness protection program. I'm set up right in front of a window. So if you can't see me, the Lord is shining on me right now. But
I was
I'm
noticing
gonna,
you gotten brighter as we were talking. I just, I don't know.
you know, well, that's how it goes. The coffee's kicking in, that type of stuff. But so we're filming this on the Thursday before the Super Bowl. So I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Oh, wow.
Chiefs or Bucs?
So I got to go Chiefs. And I tell you, the very first NFL hat I ever owned was a Chiefs hat.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, Oddly, being here, I mean, of course, I think my dad might have liked the Falcons. I never was big into the NFL, but when Joe Montana was playing for the Chiefs, I just,
Okay.
anyway, so I got to pull for the Chiefs again.
Gotta go for the
I like
Chiefs.
Mahomes. He's a neat, I think he's a neat player. And yeah, so we'll go Chiefs.
We got a hometown kid, Reggie Ragland, on the Chiefs. So, you got a hometown
Sure.
kid on there too. So
That's
yeah.
right. Good point. Yep.
All right, cool, man.
Absolutely.
This will come out, like I said, after the Super Bowl. So you may look like a genius, or it's 50-50 shot, right?
Yeah, I'll take
Well,
it.
man, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to link everything in show notes about your website, your Facebook page, the Ask Alan podcast, all that good stuff. But do you have any closing remarks? Anything else you want to share?
Judge, will say thanks again. I love the idea of relentless positivity. I think that anything that we have that's a long obedience in the same direction, it takes a relentlessness and a good attitude. And so I appreciate what you're doing out there in the fitness world, and also in just helping us as we navigate through a time when psychologically we need all the positivity and the help we can get. So I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you what you're doing, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yep. Thanks.